Tonight on Reporting Scotland, one of Scotland's most famous artists, Jack Vettriano, dies at the age of 73. The Fife-born painter, best known from his work The Singing Butler, was found dead in his home in France.
He was admired on a grand scale that most artists are not admired on.
Also on tonight's programme, the body representing rank-and-file police officers raises concerns about a response to an incident. Officers drove a police car at a man who was allegedly armed in an attempt to arrest him in Aberdeen. Police in Kenya have arrested 2 more suspects in the murder of Scottish businessman Campbell Scott.
Even in Syria, I lost my house, so it's very hard to back to Syria and build again.
We hear from some of the Syrians who call the Isle of Bute home, having settled there while fleeing their homeland.
Coming up in the sport, Hibs' season hits new heights after their latest derby win takes them 3rd in the Premiership.
Hello, I'm Laura Miller. Welcome to Monday's programme. The artist Jack Vettriano has died at the age of 73. He was the man behind the iconic painting The Singing Butler, once the UK's best-selling art print. Vettriano, who grew up in Fife, was self-taught and started out as a mining engineer. His publicist said he was found at his home in Nice on Saturday. Today, the First Minister said Vettriano had made a unique and evocative contribution to artistic life in Scotland. Our arts correspondent Polly McLean looks back at his life.
Bluer than velvet were her eyes.
For 5 decades, he's been one of the most successful and prolific artists in the world. But like his paintings, he too is an invention. Born in Methil in Fife, he was set to join his father and grandfather in the local mine.
I think the only people that romanticise about working down a pit are people that never worked down a pit.
Jack Hogan became Jack Vettriano, studying the art in Kirkcaldy art galleries so closely he worried the staff would get suspicious. His career took off, and then there was a huge demand.
I liked the fact that it was real, there was realism there, and yet it seemed to be of a slightly past era. Yet the paintings were obviously modern and of Jack's time, but somehow he seemed to evoke an era that maybe never quite was, but should have been.
Critics were less than kind about his output. His sexualised depiction of women was also problematic, but he still had fans in their millions.
More people have a Jack Vettriano print on the wall than probably any other Scottish artist. You know, he was admired and criticised in equal measure, and, you know, that gave him a level of fame.
His most famous work, The Singing Butler, set a Scottish record when it sold for £750,000 in 2004. Tomorrow, a reimagined version by Banksy will go up for auction. And his work was everywhere. In 2017, he was one of 3 artists commissioned to paint Billy Connolly, the final portrait transformed into a 50-foot mural on a city centre wall. In 2011, this self-portrait went on display at the newly refurbished National Portrait Gallery, a 3-year loan from a private collector. It was the same image shared today to announce his death.
Remembering Jack Vettriano, who's died at the age of 73. The Scottish Police Federation has raised concerns over the response to an incident in Aberdeen in which a man carrying a knife was detained by police. A police car was driven at the man on Friday afternoon as officers tried to disarm him. The SPF says an armed response vehicle had been deployed but not given authorisation to take action. Louise Hosey reports.
This online video shows the moment a police car makes contact with a man as officers in Aberdeen try to detain him. They were called to Aberdeen's Seaforth Road area on Friday after reports of a man carrying a knife. The man was struck twice by the car before being arrested. Police Scotland said specialist tactics had been used to protect the public and the officers.
The Scottish Police Federation, which represents some of Scotland's police officers, say an armed response vehicle was called here as per protocol, but it didn't receive authorisation to take action. They say police officers at the scene then had to take matters into their own hands by driving the car at the man.
The SPF say any delays in authorisation potentially puts lives at risk.
Officers who were on the scene dealt with it as well as they could from using their own officer safety techniques. There was an armed response vehicle nearby waiting to be authorised, but it wasn't authorised, and ultimately those officers of the armed response vehicle had to self-authorise, but by that time it was to render first aid rather than actually use firearms. The control room have to make a decision on when to authorise and when not to authorise, and this is the problem we have with it. We need a policy and put in place that means if you're a member of the public and you're carrying a knife or you're brandishing a knife, that ARVs have an automatic, it's automatically authorisation.
A police dog, Zeus, was injured during the incident but released after treatment. Police say the matter has been referred to the Police Investigations and Review Commissioner. A 28-year-old man, Linus Lopez, appeared at Aberdeen Sheriff Court today charged with 8 offences, including possessing a knife or bladed weapon, assault and an animal welfare charge. Louise Hosey, reporting Scotland, Aberdeen.
After a whirlwind weekend of diplomacy, the fallout from Friday's White House clash between Presidents Trump and Zelensky continues to dominate domestic politics. In the Commons today, the Prime Minister repeated his view that Britain will take a leading role in securing peace in Ukraine. Well, let's get the thoughts now of our political editor, Glenn Campbell. Glenn, let's deal with the tone in the Commons first. A remarkably united front this afternoon.
Yeah, I think it was remarkable the extent to which across party divides there was support for Sir Keir Starmer as he seeks to build some kind of coalition of the willing to win and to maintain a peace in Ukraine, a peace that he said would require strong US backing. And in the last hour, President Trump seems to have questioned the wisdom of European leaders talking about the need for US support to underpin any deal. He seems to think that's not a good negotiating position when trying to get President Putin of Russia to the table. Even the SNP in the Commons, their leader, Stephen Flynn, offering backing for the Prime Minister despite describing his position on Ukraine as weak on social media over the weekend. I think the First Minister, John Swinney, has also been very clear over the last couple of days to offer his backing for the Prime Minister. There are points of disagreement on whether it makes sense for Donald Trump to go ahead with the offered second state visit to the UK, and more significantly there's a disagreement about the UK maintaining its nuclear deterrent. The SNP do not support that. The Prime Minister challenging their position in the Commons today, suggesting that it was wrong-headed and in need of review.
Yeah, so what we're really beginning to see, Glenn, is the impact of a foreign crisis on UK politics.
Yeah, I think that is correct. The Prime Minister himself has been transformed, you could say, in recent days from a leader who was struggling to establish his position just a matter of months after winning a sweeping victory in the general election to somebody who has emerged as an international leader. Now, whether that impacts Labour's standing in opinion polls, we'll have to wait and see. But all these big international decisions that are being made will have domestic consequences. We've already seen the increase in defence spending, which no doubt will have knock-on consequences elsewhere.
OK, Glenn at Holyrood, thank you. And this is something they're going to be discussing over on the news at 7 shortly. Laura McKeever is here. Who are you hearing from tonight, Laura?
Laura, I've spoken to Irina, a Ukrainian refugee here in Scotland, just to get her hopes and fears about now and the future. We've also spoken to Jack Iredale, fresh off Hibs Derby win at the weekend. I think he is. And do you know about High Rocks? The new craze?
Heard of it, but it sounds dangerous.
We'll talk to a joiner. He had to give up joinery because of a hand injury, and he's now a High Rocks champion.
Well, eclectic as ever. Thank you very much, Laura. Now, police in Kenya are holding 2 more suspects in the murder of the Scottish businessman Campbell Scott. The 2 men appeared in court today and are accused of withdrawing money using Mr. Scott's bank cards. The businessman went missing shortly after arriving in Nairobi, and his body was later found dumped in a forest just outside the city. Anne Soy reports from Nairobi.
Investigators say Campbell Scott visited the first suspect's house before he disappeared. They believe that's where the businessman was murdered. The suspect allegedly moved out afterwards. Now, the police say the man also successfully withdrew money from Mr. Scott's bank account at 3 different locations, working together with a second suspect. They've invited Interpol to help track the victim's debit and credit cards and mobile phone. Now, the 2 suspects were arrested in the coastal city of Mombasa on Saturday and taken back to the capital, Nairobi. The court granted the police request to detain them for 21 days as investigations continue. Mr. Scott arrived in Nairobi on the 15th of last month, but disappeared a day later. Days later, his body was found inside a sack at a forest about 60 miles outside the city.
That was Anne Soy reporting from Nairobi. OK, to some of the day's other stories now. And delivery dates for a fleet of CalMac ferries being built by a shipyard in Turkey have been pushed back again due to labour shortages. According to a letter from the government-owned ferries procurement company CMAL, the first of the fleet will not be finished until the end of June at the earliest, when it was originally expected in October. Transport Scotland said the latest delay was disappointing but had been caused by global issues out with the yard's control. And Edinburgh Airport experienced a raw sewage leak in the departures terminal this morning. The airport said work being done by a contractor resulted in the incident into an area around gates 13 and 14. The area was closed off while teams dealt with the issue. The opening of Edinburgh's Sick Kids Hospital was delayed by almost 2 years because the Health Board failed to give a clear brief to building contractors, according to a key report. The Scottish Hospitals Inquiry found NHS Lothian failed to spot an error in the original design, which led to defective ventilation in critical care and which could have put patients at risk. Our health correspondent Lisa Summers reports.
All the equipment in place, patients ready to move. It was the summer of 2019. But just a matter of days before this brand new hospital should have opened, the Health Secretary intervened.
I cannot allow a move to the new hospital until I am convinced and certain that that new hospital is safe.
Today, Lord Brodie published interim findings into what went wrong. He says patients and their families were left in the dark.
The decision not to open the hospital as planned had a significant impact on patients and their families, who were shocked, scared and deeply disappointed that long-promised new facilities were not to be available for the treatment, in some cases, of children suffering from very serious conditions.
The report says NHS Lothian failed to provide a clear and robust ventilation brief to the contractor that built the hospital, and there were missed opportunities to spot mistakes. The board say complexities with the process led to delays picking up errors, but they acted as soon as they could.
Our major priority was patient safety, and we had established a process, checks and balances, just to assure ourselves. And when we identified there was an issue, we stopped. Lord Brodie very helpfully highlights the impact that the decision to pause the opening of this building had on patients, on relatives, and on our staff. And I would take the opportunity once again to sincerely and unreservedly apologise to them for that.
It was not until 2021 that the hospital finally opened. The repairs cost over £16 million.
Much of today's report is highly technical, but Lord Brodie does point to the potential risk that patients could have come to harm. However, this hospital didn't open until the problems were fixed. The second part of the public inquiry is looking at what happened in Glasgow at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. There, vulnerable patients were admitted, despite the building having a substandard ventilation and water system.
Further hearings on Glasgow will take place this spring, but a final report is not due until 2026. Lisa Summers reporting Scotland.
A student midwife from Dundee who was put on special leave from a placement with NHS Fife after posting her anti-abortion views on a private social media page says she was worried her career was over before it had even begun. Sarah Spencer underwent a fitness to practice investigation and was cleared of expressing her personal beliefs inappropriately. NHS Fife says the matter was handled by Edinburgh Napier University, where she's studying. She's been speaking to Louise Cowie.
This time last year, Sarah Spencer was enjoying the first year of her midwifery course at Edinburgh Napier University. She'd joined a social media group for trainees and responded to a question about whether midwives might opt out of providing terminations. She shared the official guidance on conscientious objection and that she was anti-abortion.
I stated plainly, simply, I believe that the fetus is a child, an unborn child, and I believe killing children is wrong. And so based on that, I would always oppose abortion. I knew I was, engaging in a very emotive topic. I don't think I was quite prepared to be pulled aside at work.
Sarah's comments had been sent to her line manager. Her university put her on special leave from a placement with NHS Fife, and she was subject to a fitness to practice investigation.
I felt like it brought back memories of being bullied and ostracized in grammar school, and just 3 months into my training, I felt like I was being told, "You're not welcome."
It was found that the 30-year-old had no case to answer and she was allowed to return to her studies. Sarah says she wouldn't push her personal views on those in her care and simply wants those with protected beliefs to be afforded more protection.
I think that the health boards throughout the UK could benefit from more awareness of freedom of speech rights and the guidance that the Nursing and Midwifery Council have given.
Edinburgh Napier University say all midwifery students are expected to abide by the code of practice set out by the Nursing and Midwifery Council. NHS Fife say the conduct of students on placement is a matter for their academic institution in line with their code of practice and not an NHS Fife decision. Sarah is now on maternity leave but hopes to return to her studies next year. Louise Cowie reporting Scotland, Dundee.
Now, the Isle of Bute has welcomed more than 100 Syrian refugees over the past decade. Fleeing civil war, they've raised children, set up businesses and become members of the local community. Many are now UK citizens, but the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria last year has given them pause for thought about whether they want to return. Angus Cochrane has been speaking to some of those who now call Bute their home.
It was like everything strange. New country, new language, new culture. I don't know what that means, like island. Yeah, because we don't have island in Syria.
More than 2,000 miles away from Syria is the tranquil island of Bute, a place that gave refuge to families fleeing civil war in their homeland.
Voilà.
Munzer set up this barber shop in Rothesay after he arrived in 2016.
Many of people die in a jail. When I was there, many people killed in the street. But now, after 14 years, you can say Syria going to be better, especially because without Assad. I'm thinking in the summer when the school finish, to visit Syria. Not to return to live there, but to visit, because still the situation needs more time.
Chosen because of a surplus of housing and school places, 125 Syrian refugees have been settled here on Bute in the past decade. 17 babies have been born to those families.
I'll show you. Assalamu alaikum. الكل السلام. You have to see everything's good here, fun things to do.
The fall of the Assad regime last year gave Syrians who fled their first realistic chance of returning home. However, this family settled on Butte say their future very much lies in Scotland.
My kids very happy here. All people here in the morning say hi, how are you, good morning. And school very good. I'm not go back to Syria because lots of my family died there and my kids born in here and me very happy here, not go back.
Many of the Syrians are now UK citizens. When they first arrived, locals rallied around to provide support, helping with everything from clothes to English lessons.
It was nice to have them come to a place that was safe for them and safe for their children and to be able to live in a nice, peaceful life. So a lot of them have set up businesses here on the island and became locals, the same as anybody else. Yes, there has been some families that have left the island, but a lot of families have remained here and are very happy here.
This cafe on the shorefront of Rothesay is run by 25-year-old Yahya. He left Damascus when he was a child, but like other young Syrians, he feels he does not have a life to return to in his homeland. Do you have any thoughts that you could go back to Syria now?
To be honest, it's hard answer because all my life is here now. My study, my jobs, my business, even my car is here, my friends, so it's very hard to take that decision. And even in Syria, I lost my house, so it's very hard to back to Syria and build again. People here are so friendly, and that's what the main reason why we love a lot of Butte, because people is so friendly here.
Angus Cochrane, reporting Scotland on the Isle of Bute.
OK, let's get tonight's sport now with Lewis, and it was quite the weekend for Hibs.
Certainly was indeed. Yeah, good time to be a Hibs fan right now. Weren't saying that a few months ago though.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Thanks very much. Hello there. Well, yes, it's a fixture that has thrown up plenty of classics over the years. But yesterday's Edinburgh derby was extra special for Hibernian after a wonder goal from defender Jack Iredale secured all 3 points at Easter Road, taking David Gray's side to third in the table. A quite remarkable turnaround in form. Just 3 months ago, they were rock bottom and staring down the barrel of relegation.
Some adversity as a team at the start of the season, and we all stuck together, and I think you're seeing the rewards now for
time. We need to keep moving forward because we've by no means completed it. I use that term a lot, but you know, it's certainly one for the fans as well today. We can all enjoy it together.
It's not always been sunshine and roses this season. A little over 3 months ago, the Easter Road side were rock bottom, and many thought it was a matter of time before head coach David Gray would be sacked. But fast forward 15 games and 34 points later, and just look at them now, in the driving seat for third, and with it, European football next season.
The start wasn't great, but he kept the same mantra the whole way through. He kept believing in the players, saying, look, we'll get it right, and he was quite calm, although he was under a huge amount of pressure.
And it just keeps getting better for Hibs because their women's team are joint top of the SWPL heading into the split. A powerful header from Ailey Adams gave them a 1-0 victory over Celtic to join Glasgow City level on points at the summit. Highlights of all the weekend's SWPL games are on BBC Scotland at 7:30. Now, it's been a tough start to life in the Ibrox dugout for Barry Ferguson, and his former Rangers teammate Stephen Naismith says the expected takeover of the club by American owners won't necessarily help close the gap on Celtic in the battle for trophies. Rangers' miserable domestic campaign continued with a 2-1 home defeat to Motherwell. It leaves Rangers 16 points behind the league leaders. A Europa League tie with Fenerbahce will bring some Premiership respite, and Naismith thinks anticipated summer investment is long overdue.
If you look at the way Celtic have performed and recruitment-wise as well, it's been very good for the last 10 years. And Rangers have been playing catch-up, so I think they need to close that gap quickly. The takeover brings a bit of optimism, but you still need to make the right choices and make the right decisions when you're recruiting, when you're picking a coaching staff and beyond, so there is a lot of work to be done.
Gregor Townsend has added 3 players to his Scotland squad for their Six Nations clash with Wales. Matt Curry here, along with Ben Muncaster, could all play at Murrayfield this weekend. The squad were back in training this morning as they tried to find a way to salvage what's been a disappointing campaign so far, with opening win against Italy followed by defeats to Ireland and England. Luke Crosby, Jack Mann, Ali Price and Ross McCann are all out of contention for Saturday's match. And that's the sport from you, Laura.
Yeah, let's stay positive, Lewis. Thank you. How's the weather, Judith? Reasons to be cheerful on that front?
I'd say so. Nothing particularly dramatic. It'll be mild and it will be windy at times. We did see something bright there across the southwest. A very good evening to you. And indeed, we're starting to see some later sunsets, aren't we? A lovely fiery sky there coming in from one of our weather watchers up in the northeast. Let's take a wee look at the pressure chart to get a feel for what's going on. So yes, we have high pressure down towards the southeast of us, then low pressure out towards the northwest. Here we have quite a squeeze in the isobars, bringing southwesterly winds across the country, and the windy few days to come with some rain at times for western Scotland. It's always driest for the south and east. Winds are expected to ramp up tonight, though, as will clouds start to increase, pushing its way across the country, limiting any clear skies to the northeast. It'll be a mild night, some bits and pieces of rain pushing into the west coast by tomorrow morning. Strong winds for the west coast, even touching gale force across the far north by tomorrow morning. But a mild start to tomorrow and a fairly cloudy start as well. And you'll certainly notice it windy tomorrow. Strong, gusty southwesterly winds for pretty much all of us. By the time we reach the afternoon, a band of more persistent rain moving into the northwest and indeed the Northern Isles as well. And associated with that, those strong gusty winds touching gale force at times. It'll be the gustiness of the winds that you'll notice tomorrow. But we should see some sunshine across the northeast, possibly 14 Celsius here. And some brightness coming through for eastern Scotland. I think the graphics are a wee bit optimistic, but we should see some bright skies coming through with the borders for East Lothian and even with shelter from Northern Ireland across the southwest as well. But we pick up on that frontal cloud lying across western Scotland, quite murky conditions here, and that persistent rain for the Western Isles, for Skye and the northwest Highlands, and those winds reaching gale force at times here, so wet and very windy here. Now that front across the northwest gradually sinks southwards as we head through tomorrow night. Very little rain making it through to the east, and the rain actually eases during the overnight period. Another mild one, and indeed a mild start to Wednesday. Fairly cloudy, some bits and pieces of rain in the west, but in the east we should see some sunshine, possibly up to 15 Celsius across the northeast. And then on Thursday, the winds back into the south, clearing the cloud away, so some sunshine, and the winds finally ease for us on Friday. That's your forecast.
Thank you, Judith. And that is Reporting Scotland. The late news is at 10:30. Until then, enjoy your evening. Good night.